In a small town where dreams often collided with harsh realities, there lived a girl whose heart burned with an obsession that was as beautiful as it was dangerous. Her name was Mehak, a name that evoked both grace and a quiet intensity. From a very young age, Mehak had been entranced by the gleaming allure of cars. While other children played with simple toys, she would spend hours gazing at glossy brochures and watching vehicles glide by on busy streets, imagining herself behind the wheel of a car that spoke of freedom, luxury, and a life far removed from the struggles of her humble beginnings. Mehak's fascination with cars wasn't merely a passing fancy. It was a passion that consumed her every waking thought. In her dreams, she saw herself driving along endless highways, the wind caressing her face as the world blurred into streaks of vibrant color. But the reality was far less glamorous. Mehak came from a background where money was scarce, and the prospect of owning even a modest vehicle seemed like an unattainable fantasy. Each day, she would watch enviously as shiny cars passed her by, symbols of a life that promised independence and success, luxuries that her reality could never afford. As the years passed, Mehak's longing for a car became an almost palpable hunger, a desire that she believed could fill the void in her life, transforming her existence into one of glamour and adventure. Yet, with no money to spare and no viable means to earn enough, the chasm between her dreams and reality widened with every passing day. Desperation began to creep into her thoughts like a slow, insidious fog. It was during one of those sleepless nights, when the moon hung low in the sky and the silence of her small room pressed in on her, that a dangerous idea began to take shape. In a murmur of half-forgotten conversations and in the scattered whispers of local gossip, Mehak had learned of a man named Faisal. Faisal was known throughout the town as a well-to-do individual with a taste for the finer things in life. His car, a sleek, modern marvel that shone like a beacon of success, was the envy of many. But what caught Mehak's attention was not just the car, but the fact that Faisal was married. In the eyes of society, his life was supposed to be complete, secure, and unassailable. And yet, as Mehak pondered the situation in the solitude of her room, a plan began to form in her mind, a plan that promised to bridge the gap between her desires and her reality. At first, it seemed almost too audacious to be true, a girl with nothing to her name daring to set her sights on a married man. Yet, as the nights wore on and her obsession deepened, Mehak became convinced that the rules of morality could be bent, that the pursuit of one's heart's desire might justify actions that others would condemn. With a resolve born of equal parts longing and desperation, she decided to trap Faisal, not through brute force or overt deception, but with the delicate art of seduction and manipulation. The idea was to weave a web so alluring that Faisal, despite his marital vows, would be drawn into her orbit and unwittingly hand over the very object of her dreams, his car. Mehak began her quest by observing Faisal from a distance. She learned his routines, the days he frequented the upscale cafe in the town square, the evenings he spent in the refined ambience of his office, and the rare moments when, away from the prying eyes of society, he seemed vulnerable and lost. With careful deliberation, she crafted her persona to be the perfect antidote to his loneliness. In hushed tones and subtle glances, she communicated a promise of excitement, of a secret world where the ordinary rules did not apply. Her eyes sparkled with mischief as she laid the groundwork for a connection that was as dangerous as it was intoxicating. Their first encounter was by chance, or so it seemed. On a brisk autumn afternoon, as the leaves danced in the golden light of a setting sun, Mehak found herself in the same cafe where Faisal often went to escape the rigidity of his daily life. Dressed in a carefully chosen ensemble that balanced innocence with allure, she sat at a corner table, her gaze drifting casually toward the entrance. When Faisal stepped in, his eyes met hers for just a moment, a fleeting connection that sent a shiver down her spine. That brief encounter was enough to set the wheels of her plan in motion. Over the following weeks, Mehak and Faisal's paths began to cross more frequently. At first, Their interactions were nothing more than polite exchanges, a smile here, a nod there. But gradually, the conversation deepened. Mehak, with a practiced charm, began to hint at a shared understanding of life's hidden desires. Faisal, whose heart had grown weary of the stifling expectations of his life, found himself inexplicably drawn to her. In the quiet corners of cafes and during fleeting moments of private conversation, he began to confide in her, revealing the strains of a marriage that, beneath the surface, was crumbling under the weight of unmet expectations and silent discontent. Mehak listened with the careful attention of a seasoned storyteller, her heart swelling with every word of his disillusionment. Yet beneath the layers of empathy, a calculating mind was at work. Every smile she offered, every gentle touch of her hand, was designed to weave a net around his fragile emotions. In the back of her mind, the image of the gleaming car, the ultimate symbol of success and freedom, shone like a beacon. Slowly but surely, Faisal's defenses began to crumble. He started to see her as the antidote to his loneliness, as the escape from a life that had grown increasingly oppressive. One fateful evening, as a soft rain pattered against the windows of a secluded restaurant, the delicate balance of their burgeoning connection reached a tipping point. Over a candlelit dinner that exuded an air of intimacy and secrecy, Mehak and Faisal's conversation veered into territories neither had dared explore before. The murmur of soft music, the glow of flickering candles, and the quiet hum of whispered confidences created an atmosphere charged with possibility. It was then that Mehak, with a smile that masked her inner resolve, laid bare the true nature of her intentions. She spoke of a world where rules were mere suggestions, where the pursuit of one's desires could transcend the confines of convention. Her words were laced with a dangerous kind of poetry, each sentence designed to seduce not only the mind but the very soul of the listener. Faisal, whose heart was already teetering on the edge of a long-forgotten passion, was entranced. In that moment, as the weight of societal expectations melted away beneath the warmth of her gaze, he made a choice that would set into motion a series of events as unpredictable as they were inevitable. The next days passed in a blur of secret meetings, whispered promises, and stolen moments that were as fleeting as they were intense. Mehak's plan was unfolding with an elegance that belied its dark underpinnings. Faisal, caught in the throes of an affair that defied the sanctity of his vows, began to trust her implicitly. The car, a sleek, silver machine that symbolized not just wealth, but the promise of a life unburdened by convention, became a tangible prize in this dangerous game of seduction. Mehak, with the precision of a master strategist, orchestrated a situation where Faisal, overcome by a desire to share his newfound sense of liberation, willingly handed over the keys. For a brief, shining moment, Mehak believed that her dreams had been realized. The car, gleaming under the afternoon sun as she took possession of it, seemed to whisper promises of endless freedom and unbridled adventure. It was a triumph born of cunning and audacity, a prize that was as intoxicating as it was symbolic. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, the euphoria of her success began to wane, replaced by an insidious sense of dread that crept into her every thought. At first, it was a quiet murmur at the back of her mind, a nagging reminder that the world she had so eagerly embraced was built on fragile foundations of deceit. The thrill of having outsmarted fate gave way to a gnawing anxiety, as she realized that the consequences of her actions were far more complex than she had anticipated. Faisal's life, once marked by subtle discontent, began to unravel in unexpected ways. Rumors swirled in hushed tones. Guilt and regret became constant companions in his waking hours. The man who had once been a symbol of worldly success was now a tormented soul, caught in the crossfire of his own missteps. For Mehak, the car that had symbolized her triumph soon became a shackle. Its sleek lines and polished chrome, which once promised escape and excitement, now served as a daily reminder of the moral precipice upon which she had teetered. Each time she started the engine, A surge of adrenaline would give way to a cold, unsettling fear that she had strayed too far from the path of righteousness. In the solitude of long, empty nights, the roar of the engine was a haunting echo of a choice made in desperation, a choice that had set her on a collision course with destiny. As the reality of her situation sank in, Mehak found herself entangled in a web of unforeseen consequences. The thrill of the stolen car was overshadowed by a series of misfortunes that began to mount inexorably. Friends who had once admired her daring now looked upon her with a mix of pity and disapproval. The community, bound by its unspoken codes of honor, whispered behind closed doors about the girl who had dared to defy the natural order. And as the pressures mounted, so too did the weight of guilt and regret, until it became a constant, oppressive presence in her life. Faisal, too, spiraled into a state of despair. The illicit affair, which had promised liberation and excitement, turned out to be a double-edged sword. His marriage, already on shaky ground, collapsed into open chaos, leaving him isolated and tormented by the choices he had made. The woman he had betrayed, a dignified and loving partner who had once shared his dreams, was left to pick up the pieces of a life shattered by deceit. And in the midst of this emotional storm, Faisal's own inner demons emerged, haunting him with memories of a time when he had been a man of honor. The suspense of those early days of temptation gradually transformed into an overwhelming drama of regret and loss. Mehak, once intoxicated by the promise of a better life on wheels, began to see the true cost of her ambition. The car, once a gleaming trophy of her determination, now sat idle in a garage, a monument to the folly of choices made in the dark. Its every curve and contour was a silent testament to the price of desire, a reminder that the pursuit of material dreams often exacts a toll that goes far beyond what the eye can see. In the relentless march of time, the consequences of that fateful decision became inescapable. Mehak's world, which had once shimmered with the seductive glow of possibility, was now consumed by a deep and unyielding melancholy. The relationships she had once taken for granted, friendships, fleeting romances, and even the quiet bonds of community, crumbled under the weight of her deception. Her internal struggle grew ever more turbulent, a battle between the seductive lure of a luxurious life and the gnawing awareness of her own moral bankruptcy. Every night, as she lay awake in an unfamiliar bed, the sound of her own heartbeat was a grim reminder of the choices that had led her to this precipice. In a cruel twist of fate, the very dream that had propelled her into this dangerous liaison eventually turned against her. The allure of the car, the symbol of freedom and success, proved to be a hollow mirage. Its promise of escape evaporated into a nightmarish reality of isolation and despair. Legal troubles emerged unexpectedly, as those who had once been complicit in the affair began to distance themselves, leaving Mehak to face the consequences alone. The tangled web of lies unraveled in a public scandal that exposed every hidden facet of her desperate gamble. The media, ever hungry for salacious details, turned her story into a cautionary tale of ambition, deceit, and ultimate downfall. Faisal's life, already marred by regret, took an even darker turn. Tormented by the collapse of his marriage and the burden of his betrayal, he withdrew further into himself, his once bright future reduced to a shadowy reflection of remorse. His every attempt at redemption was thwarted by the relentless judgment of society and the piercing glare of his own conscience. And as the days turned into months, the bitterness of his lost honor and the emptiness of his ill-fated affair became an inescapable prison from which there was no escape. In the final, heart-wrenching act of this tragic drama, Mehak found herself standing at the crossroads of her own existence, a point where every choice, every lie, and every stolen moment had led to the inevitable collapse of her world. The car, once a beacon of hope, was now nothing more than a relic of her misguided ambition. Its keys, which had opened the door to a fleeting dream of luxury, were now locked away in the recesses of a life that had been irrevocably altered. In the harsh light of day, she was forced to confront the consequences of her actions, the shattered relationships, the ruined reputation, and a deep, unyielding sense of loss that no amount of material wealth could ever mend. And so, as the final chapter of her ill-fated pursuit came to a close, Mehak was left with nothing but the echoes of a dream that had once promised so much and delivered only heartache. The very trap she had so cunningly set had ensnared her in a web of despair from which there was no escape. The car that had symbolized her ambition now stood as a monument to the price of desire, a silent witness to the downfall of a girl who had reached too far, too fast, only to lose everything she had ever held dear. In the quiet aftermath of the scandal and the personal ruin, the town whispered the cautionary tale of Mehak, the girl who loved cars more than life itself, who dared to transgress the boundaries of morality in pursuit of a dream, and who ultimately discovered that some treasures come at a cost too high to bear. Her story, recounted in hushed tones by those who had once admired her daring, became a timeless parable of ambition, deception, and the cruel lessons of fate. It served as a reminder that the pursuit of desire, when fueled by desperation and unchecked ambition, can lead to a path of irreversible destruction, where the glitter of material wealth masks the darkest shadows of the human soul. And thus, dear listener, as you sit and ponder the tragic fate of Mehak, let her story be a beacon of caution and introspection. For in a world where dreams and desires are as intoxicating as they are dangerous, it is all too easy to be led astray by the shimmering promises of the unattainable. Her journey, marked by the thrill of temptation and the agony of loss, reminds us that the price of chasing after an illusion may well be the very essence of our being. In the end, the allure of a stolen car and a fleeting moment of forbidden passion proved to be nothing more than a mirage, a promise that, once grasped, crumbled into dust, leaving behind only the bitter taste of regret and the haunting echo of a life forever changed. It is a tale that lingers in the corridors of memory, a somber reflection on the impermanence of dreams and the inexorable march of consequence. And as the winds of time carry away the remnants of a once bright hope, we are left to wonder, was it worth the price? For Mehak, the answer came too late, in the form of a life stripped bare, a soul left wandering in the ruins of what might have been. Let her story be a lesson to all who dare to reach for the stars without first understanding the gravity of the fall. In that final, silent moment, as the echoes of her ambition faded into the night, the truth was laid bare for all to see, a truth as undeniable as it was painful, that in the pursuit of a dream built on deception, one may indeed win the prize, but at the cost of losing oneself entirely.